Hey everybody, we are talking about trig discovery lesson here today. It's vertical whiteboards and also a little bit of practice. So my lesson that I created aligns to the Kentucky High School Geometry 12 standard, understanding properties of right triangles, specifically sine, cosine, and tangent with trig ratios. The learning targets that I had pulled were students will be able to use trigonometric functions and they'll be able to find missing side lengths or angles on any triangle. We're going to kind of deep dive into specifically the using the trig functions learning target. We're going to use vertical whiteboards to discover trig ratios, and we are also going to solve equations using fractions, kind of get them setting up in order to solve sides and angles. The actual lesson itself is going to be 4 different stations. I'm going to have a station for sine, for cosine, and for tangent. And then the last one is to solving equations. Now, the sine, cosine, and tangent stations will be something like this. So this will be up on a whiteboard, on the vertical whiteboards. And the idea is that there are 2 completed questions. Sine of A is 4 over 5. Sine of C is 5 over 13. And ask them these 3 questions. What patterns do you see for the sine functions? How can you find the sine of an angle given 3 sides? They're coming up with these patterns. And then an actual question giving 3 sides. They have to draw the triangle and find sine of A. The idea here is I want to get them thinking, to find patterns, to see the triangle itself, and to figure out where these come from. Cosine is the exact same, except we change the answers, and then tangent as well. And so the idea of these 3 stations is that the first one might take a little while. They're having to figure it out for the very first time, come up with these patterns. The second station might take a little bit of time because they see a pattern. Now let's change it slightly. And then by the third one, it should take very little time. I think I set up like 10 minutes, then 8 minutes, then 5 minutes for each station as you go through. The last station I set for them was the fraction equations. So I give a proportion, a solving an equation, one-step equation with a division, and then what if there was a fraction in front of the variable. I also give the 3 answers, but they have to solve it themselves in order to figure out how to get those answers. And then they have to explain and solve 3 examples, 3 practice questions, one of each type, just to make sure they understood it. During this time period of the 4 stations, the idea is that I will be going around, making sure they don't get frustrated, and giving them small hints throughout in order to keep them in that zone of working. And it should take about half the class period, if not a little bit longer, to fully comprehend these 4 stations. And afterwards, we're going to do practice. So the practice I set up, the first, I believe, 8 questions is just, can you write the trig ratio? Pretty simple, pretty quick. They should get it, especially after those 4 stations. Then it's going to go into review. So the previous work we had done was Pythagorean theorem and special right triangles. So there are several questions here. They might be able to get through some, probably not all, but there's plenty of work for people, groups that work really fast, get through the 4 questions extremely quick. The final bit of my practice page is a trig extension. So it's find the missing side. So they have to write the trig ratio, but then they have to figure out, well, I know how to solve a proportion or I know how to solve a fraction question, and I can now do this. I don't expect many people to get this far. I also don't expect them to fully comprehend what this is happening just yet. That's why it's an extension. It's not until the next day that I would bring this in and we would have a full class discussion about it. But that is the idea of the lesson. 4 stations, a quick discussion about what we saw. We also want to probably explain the phrase SOHCAHTOA just so that they can remember sine, cosine, and tangent. And then they work on the practice page. I expect this to last one full period, but this could lead into the next day and then build in finding sine, build in finding sides, and then later pull in angles. But that is the idea of this trig practice, 4 stations of discovery, and then practice on it with a little bit of a discussion inside. And that's all I got. Thank you for listening.